All right, looks like we've got a great group here today. Let's get started. If you haven't met me yet, I am Holly. I am one of the customer success managers here at Giraffe, and I'm really excited to go through our webinar on uploading geospatial data today. This is one of our most popular webinars, so buckle up, get ready. We've got a lot of information to go through here. On that note, if you have any questions during the webinar, you can just drop them in the meeting chat and I will get to them as I can. I do want to make sure that we get through all of the information that I have to share with you today. And if we have some time left over at the end, I'm happy to stop recording and you can raise your hand and ask a question live as well. So, with that being said, sit back, relax, get ready to perhaps take some notes, and let's dive right in here. So, today, of course, we are talking about how to upload your spatial data into Giraffe. If you've used Giraffe already, you're probably familiar a bit with the layer palette and the layer library, which has hundreds, if not thousands, of layers that the Giraffe team have uploaded over the years, mostly open data from local governments around the world. But you might find that it doesn't have everything you need for your specific project. And that's where your ability to upload your own data layers comes in. And that's what we will be taking a look at today. So I'd like to take a moment to just start with the basics here. Like, what even is a spatial data layer? And then what are the different types that are available? So going back to baseline, a layer is a database. It is a GIS database, GIS being Geographic Information Systems, and it contains a group of features or information that represent real world objects. Things like parcels, streets, postal codes, uh, manhole cover locations. There's so many spatial data sets out there that can geolocate just about anything that you can imagine. The features can be stored in the data set as points, lines, or areas like polygons. And layers can also include things like raster images, like satellite imagery, or even 3D models, if we're thinking like an Esri scene server, or if you're familiar with Giraffe, the 3D buildings layer from OpenStreetMaps. Each feature in the layer is visually represented on the map, and it also has additional attributes or properties that are stored in the database. So let's take a look at all of these different, great information that we can get in spatial data and see what types we can use in Giraffe. So on your screen, you're seeing a list of the data formats that Giraffe accepts. The first category being vector data. And when we're talking about vector data here, these are data sets that you would have downloaded to your computer. So they're not web hosted, they're a like point in time file download. So that's something like a GeoJSON, a shape file, a KML, a DXF from AutoCAD, or even a spreadsheet in CSV format. We also accept raster formats, and that's your classic images and PDFs, so JPEG, PNG, and PDF formats. And then we also connect to a few different APIs. Those APIs being Esri, which, if you've touched GIS before, you've seen that Esri, those Esri servers. So we connect to map server, feature server, and scene server from Esri. And we also connect to WMS APIs. So that's really great if you're in Europe. A lot of the data is stored in WMS format. And then you can also create layers and base maps using Mapbox. And Mapbox is sort of a more, if you really want to get in the weeds on what your map looks like, that's the place to do it. You can decide what your icons are and what colors the different things are and labels and all of that. You can really go down a rabbit hole with Mapbox. Um, but that connection allows you to update your map style really granularly if you would like. Um, of course, every data format has its pros and cons. Um, I've listed this list in good, better, best. That's considering, most situations. The best data is the data that you have, though. So if you have it in a certain format, we can help you get it into Giraffe. As long as it is a format that works with the Giraffe backend. So I like to say good data formats are your raster, so your JPEG, PNG, and your PDFs, a DXF from CAD, or a CSV. The reason I only put those in the good category is because they all require quite a bit of work before you can bring them into Giraffe. So a raster is obviously not geolocated. It's just basically representing a piece of paper. So when you bring it into Giraffe, you have to sort of scale it and move it into place and rotate it around. So that takes a little bit of work to make sure that it's in the right spot. A DXF file is in a similar category of being difficult to geolocate. Oftentimes you might get this information from your architect, or even a civil engineer sometimes doesn't have it geolocated. They're drawing it sort of as lines in CAD, but it doesn't have a geo reference. So when you upload that into Giraffe, it doesn't know where it needs to go. So you have some options. You can manually georeference it yourself. You can ask the person who authored that CAD file if they use geolocation, and if then what is the coordinate system that they used. Or you can just upload it as lines and move it into place, similar to what you would do with a raster image. But as you can see, that takes a little bit of work before you can get it into Giraffe, just because DXF is not a native spatial format and Giraffe is natively spatial. So those conversations between the file types can be difficult sometimes. And then a CSV is really awesome if you have like a list of addresses, because that's what is intended to be uploaded in CSV format to Giraffe. So if you have a list of addresses for some comps that you want to upload in, that's a really great way to use it. But otherwise, if you have a CSV of like polygon information, or anything that's not point based with an address associated, that CSV isn't going to work in our system. Better, I would say, is Esri Map Server, Scene Server, WMS, Mapbox, and KML. The reason I put these all in better is because they often have much more information attached to the polygons or the points or the lines contained in that data set. So that when you do some map queries, when you right click on the map to see what that information is, you can actually see additional things. All of these formats will be natively georeferenced. So when you add them into Giraffe, they're going to go in the right spot, which makes it really easy. But the reason I put them only in better is if you're someone who likes to really manipulate your spatial data and get down in the weeds and like filter and sort and maybe change the appearance, those data types are not going to be able to do that in Giraffe. So they're excellent, and they're going to give you all the information you need. But if you're someone who likes using that data table function in Giraffe, they're not going to be compatible with the data table, unfortunately. And then your best formats are going to be your Esri feature server, a GeoJSON, or a shapefile. My personal preferences are shape or feature server. And the reason for that is, feature server, of course, is an API connection. So it live updates whenever there's updates to the data from the data source, and unlimited size because it's being hosted by that data source. And then my second best option there is shapefile because they tend to be pretty compact. It's already a zipped folder. So the data has already been compressed as opposed to a GeoJSON that is not compressed. So sometimes it's just too large to upload into Giraffe. Giraffe does have a 10 megabyte limit for standalone files that you're uploading, and that is to keep your projects performant. If you're uploading massive, massive files that are, just file hosted in the Giraffe database, your computer is going to have a hard time processing those. Whereas if it is hosted on an API server, all of that processing is being done off of your computer. So it is going to be much faster. So that's, of course, take this all with a grain of salt. Like I said at the beginning, the best data set is the data set you have. So, if you're working with something that's a raster or a DXF, we can make it work. Just might take a little bit of more elbow grease on the front end. So I've got a question in the chat that's asking if it's possible to georeference a raster file with coordinates. The best way that I could recommend doing that is to draw in your Giraffe project the coordinates that you want to reference to as points or as a rectangle, or even if you have like parcel outlines or something like that, and then have those same reference points on your raster file so that when you are moving that raster file into place, you have those exact reference points to put them together. But there's not a way to say like, this JPEG is georeferenced in this way. It's just being uploaded as basically a, it's not georeferenced in any way in our system until you move it around. So there are some tricks to get it into the right place, but you do have to still do it manually. All right. So with all of that being said, you've probably know this already if you're working with spatial data. The hardest part about actually using data in Giraffe is just finding it. You're probably used to going to your county GIS site and maybe some federal databases, and maybe you have something from your civil engineer, and you've got them all up in different tabs and different windows on your computer, and you're trying to overlay them all at the same time. It's a mess, right? It's so difficult to get that sort of one pane of glass view of everything all at once. So once you find it, though, it's super easy to load that into Giraffe and just see it all at once in your single Giraffe project. So let's just take a moment now to look at how I go about finding spatial data to use in my projects. And then right after that, we'll look at loading that data into a project as an example. All right. So to look for data, I'm literally just going to go to my trusty Google here and start searching for something. So I'm going to maybe search for, let's say I'm looking for data in Philadelphia, and I want Philadelphia GIS information. So some of the really good keywords to use when you're searching in Google is the city name plus something like open data. A lot of cities have open data websites. Like you can see here, Philadelphia has the open data Philly. And when I open this up, I can see all of the different kinds of data that Philly makes available. Now, the problem with an open data website is it's not all going to be geospatial information, right? They're just publishing every data set that they've made as the city, and some things might not be compatible. It might just be like a list of information or a financial report. There's a lot of things in the open data websites. So I could go through to probably browse all data sets and just search maybe for GIS and see what comes up. Um, this might take a little bit longer if I'm not super familiar with that specific website. So another sort of search term that I like to use is again the city name. And then I will type in the topic that I'm looking for plus GIS. So maybe I'm looking for planning regions GIS for Philly. And look, it's given me at the top of my search for Google an ArcGIS website, which looks really promising to me. And it says planning districts. And I've got the open data PHL maps. So I'm going to click on it. This looks like it'll be really helpful for me. And what I found here is a website that looks kind of like this. And you may have seen a website that looks like this in the past. This is what sort of the front-facing Esri data repositories look like. And it has a lot of information about this data set. It has some cool stuff like what attributes are stored on those shapes, what additional maps might be relevant. But what I'm looking for is that API link, right? So I'm going to scroll down here and I have some options. I have view data source and I have view all metadata. I think I want to click on view data source. And yes, I'm going to find a website that looks like this. It looks like nothing, right? This, it doesn't look like this is a website that's going to give me any information, but this is your URL for Giraffe. So what I am noticing is this ends in 0. I want to grab everything before that slash. So my URL that I'm looking for, if I want to connect to an Esri map server or scene server or feature server, should end in the words feature server, map server, or scene server. And then I can just copy that URL. And if we pop back over to Giraffe, this is when I can start uploading that data. So just to reiterate on your sort of Google search terms, try a few different things, but your goal is to find a website where you can either download something like a shapefile or a GeoJSON, or where you find something like we just did, where it's an Esri repository or a WMS site. So once you find that, if it's something that is super relevant to you, you might want to bookmark it and sort of start adding a lot of the layers that are available in that repository. But if it's sort of a one-off thing, you've found it, you're good to go, just copy that URL and pop over to Giraffe. So now that we're in our Giraffe project, you're going to go into our layer library to add that layer. So I'm just going to click on the add data layer icon here in layers. Let me make my screen a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. So I'm going to click on add data layer here. And this is going to open up the layer library. So just as a reiteration from earlier, the layer library does have a ton of stuff in it already. So if you're interested, like I am in this example, in Philadelphia, just type the name of the city that you're interested in and see all the stuff that comes up. Look at all of this. It's kind of ridiculous. What you will see in the layer library is both stuff that Giraffe team has uploaded, so that's us, and it's public and available to everyone who uses Giraffe. And you might also see things from other workspace, from your workspace, unless you're in another workspace with another team member who shared something with you, you might see more stuff. But you will also see layers from your workspace as well. So as you add things to the library, you don't have to upload it every single project. You just upload it once and then it's in your layer library to reuse. So we'll look at giving things a descriptive name and tags and things like that so it's easier to find. But just remember that you don't have to keep re-uploading it every time. Once it's there, you can use it over and over again. So today I'm going to do the create new layer. And when I click on create new layer, you can see all of the options that we talked about earlier on. We've got our vector, we've got our raster, we've got Esri, and we've got WMS. So the website that I just found is Esri. So that's the one I'm going to click on. And if you remember, I still have that URL on my clipboard. So I'm ready to just paste that URL right here. So that's the URL that I found. And then I'm going to click fetch layers from this service. And it's going to load in that information and start displaying it on the map. So what this data set is specifically is just the planning regions in Philly. So it's basically like where the voting lines are for projects. If I wanted to, I could also apply some additional styling to this before I finish uploading. So if I click on display style here, right now it's sort of coloring everything as just white, but I could have it colored by district name. And maybe I want to change these colors. Maybe I don't like that color set. And if I've got sort of duplicates, I can even come in here and maybe make this one like lighter pink, etc. Update. And what's cool about setting the styling before you save is this will be the default styling now every time you add this data set to a project. So if you have the opportunity with a feature server or a shape or a GeoJSON to style it before you completely add it to your library, I definitely recommend it. And then the last thing I want to do before saving is update this layer name, because you can see it kind of brought in just the like very code looking display name, not very descriptive for me. So I'm going to rename this planning districts. And then I also, a lot of times, if there is a description, I like to copy some of that information in here and put it in the description. It's just more information about the layer for someone else in your workspace who might want to use it. And it makes it easier to search for it in that layer library because more keywords will come up when you search. So that's just a little tip to add some additional information there if you would like. And then I'm just going to click Save Layer. It's going to process it, add it to my project, add it to the layer library, and then it's going to render in here. So there we go. We are good with that first layer. So that's the same process for whether it's a feature server, map server, or scene server. The only difference with the feature server that I showed you is that the layer styling will come up and you'll see that table while you're uploading it. The other types won't show the layer styling. The layer styling will just be saved within the layer. Awesome. So let me pause for just a hot second and see if anyone has any questions. Just drop those in the webinar chat as you think of them. The next sort of things that we're going to do is look at some other data types. So the first data type that I want to look at is a WMS. So we just looked at the Esri server and it looks like this. When you're looking at a WMS data site and you go to the API endpoint, this is what it looks like. So it looks a little bit different, but no need to be worried. This is what it should look like. The only thing that you need to make sure with a WMS is that it has this request equals get capabilities. So if you find a WMS and it doesn't include that in the URL, it's not going to have permission for you to make calls to that API endpoint. They've basically set it up that they don't want you to integrate it into another software. You could always reach out to the data provider and see if they would be willing to give you the get capabilities URL. A lot of times they will be, especially if it's open data. But just look out for that. You need the get capabilities to bring this in. And then when we pop back over to Giraffe, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go to create new layer, but this time we're going to select WMS. And I'm going to paste in that URL. And other than that, it's going to be very similar to what we looked at before. One thing we're noticing here that's a little bit different is that this API endpoint actually has multiple layers inside of it. So it's asking me to choose which layer I want to bring in. I think I want to bring in the Philadelphia imagery 2022. That's what's in this data set. It's an imagery data set, so that's the one I'm selecting. So just to note, if you were interested in bringing in all of these different layers within that endpoint, you'd have to upload them each as an individual layer into Giraffe. So a lot of times with API endpoints, if they have multiple layers, only one or two are really interesting to you, so just grab those. But if you wanted all of them, you would have to do each one individually. So I'm going to save that. Same thing. I'm going to give it a, more human formatted name, and then just save that layer. And now what you're noticing probably is that this layer went underneath my other one. Why is that? So each layer as you add is going to get added to the bottom of the layer tree. The layer tree also displays the order that the things are rendered in. So if I wanted this imagery to render on top, I need to move it to the top of my list. If I wanted this imagery to display on top but be a little bit transparent, I can also update that in my layers here. And then to make sure that this is how it displays the next time I open my project, I just want to click save. So each layer gets added. You don't have to save as you're adding layers, but if you make adjustments to the order or the opacity of those layers, definitely make sure you hit a save there if you want to keep those changes. All right. Well, we've just looked at two different API sources. Let's take a look at a standalone data source. So I'm going to, again, do create new layer. This time I'm going to select vector. And I am going to browse for that file on my computer. Whoops. I think I have, there we go. Can you see? Yeah. Okay, I need to go to my data samples. And the sample I want to bring up is my Philadelphia neighborhoods. You might have, a myriad of different shape files saved to your computer for what you're using, but today I'm just getting those Philadelphia neighborhoods. And then what you'll notice here with the file upload is you have two different options. One option is to turn it into a layer, and another option, if the file has less than 100 objects in it, is to import it to the project as geometry. So if you were uploading, say, maybe building outlines for your specific site that you're working on, you might want those to just be draft geometries right away instead of being a spatial layer. So you have that option here. Again, I'm going to do my color before I upload it. I'm happy with those colors this time, so I'm just going to leave it. Then I'm going to click next. I'm going to change the name. And then I'll just click save layer. And again, this will get added to my project. Turn off my other ones just so we can see this when it gets loaded in. And there we go. There are my Philadelphia neighborhoods all ready to go. If I had done a little bit more work, I would have made sure all of these had a color assigned, but when you're uploading something new, you'll take the time to make sure it's formatted really nicely. So you'll have that same process if you are uploading a shapefile, a GeoJSON, KML, all of those sort of vector file formats will take you through the same process at upload. So let's take a look at one other vector format that will be slightly different. And this one is a CSV format. So I'm going to grab one that I have here as an example, which is all of the hospital locations in Philadelphia. And this is a data set that I have that, let's see if I open this, if we can see it, or if I'll have to reshare. Whoops. That opened in not Excel. I just want to show you the formatting of this CSV to make sure that you know how to set it up. There we go. So this CSV is set up with an address for every item in the list. This address is what Giraffe is going to search for to place those points. So make sure you include that address in your CSV file, and make sure it's named address so that Giraffe knows what to search for. And then once you've loaded it into Giraffe, again, you have the option here of styling it as a layer or importing it to the project as just points. I'm going to style this layer a little bit where I just want to add some labels to these. And I just want the hospital name on all of those labels. And then I'll just click next, give it a better name, and save it. And now we've got our hospital locations coming in as labels on the map. Perfect. So that CSV upload is really great for things like comps, for sort of important points of interest, anything that you might want to have, you know, labeled as a location on your map. And then the last kind of upload that I want to demonstrate today is just how that raster upload works. So before I go here, I'm actually going to go to the PSFS building here on the map. If you're not familiar with the PSFS building, it is the first international style modern building that was built in the US. So it's pretty cool, pretty special here in Philly. And my example for my raster is a floor plan of one of the levels of the PSFS building. So you can see here when it brings in the PDF, it's going to ask me to choose which page I want to use. This PDF is only one page, but if you had a multi-page PDF, you'd choose which page. And then it's going to ask you which zoom level you want. This PDF isn't giant, so I'm going to leave it at 100%. And then it's going to ask me to crop. So when you have a PDF like this, where it's multiple floors, or you might get a PDF that has lots of text and extra stuff on it and, you know, title blocks and all of that garbage, you don't need that in your Giraffe project to be tracing over or looking at. So you can just crop out anything that's not relevant. And then it is going to bring this in. I'm going to make my 3D buildings a little bit transparent so it's easier to see. And then, like I said, you're just going to start rotating and stretching this into place. So, actually, I think I remember that this, the floor plan is backwards in this PDF. I have not changed it since the last time I did this webinar. If I do this, will it, oh yes. Okay, so my PDF was backwards, but I just reversed it. So now we are getting this going the correct direction. I'm just kind of stretching it into place. I'm not being super precise here because I don't need this for actual purposes of measuring off of, but you would want to be more precise than I am being. And then you can give the file a name and then just save. And now I have my lovely floor plan here, and I can turn that on and off as I need. So that is the sort of the basics of the main categories of different types of layers that you can upload into Giraffe. A good thing to note is when you upload a layer, you become the administrator of that layer. You are the layer owner. So if you have multiple people in your workspace, they will not be the owners of that layer. So they might not see it in the data library. You can make sure they see it in the library by going to the three dots here and manage, and then scrolling down here and sharing it with your entire workspace. You can share it with just specific people if you want to, like, maybe only one other person in your company should have access to this layer. But if everyone should, you can just come in here and share it with the entire workspace. And then people will be able to find it when they go in here to search for Philadelphia 2022. And you'll see all the times that I've uploaded it for this demonstration. But just make sure that you've shared it with your team and they will be able to find it as well. Other things that you can do in Manage is oops, I think I needed to go to, yes. So you can change the group here. So the grouping is how it will group in your layer library. So if I pop back into the layer library, you'll see that you have this option to group the layers by workspace or by layer group. So if you give your layers really descriptive layer groups, they're going to show up in those here. And then if you want to go even a little bit further, you can add tags to those groups. So if I come into the layer library and click more, I'm going to get an option to add tags here. So I'm going to add my PHL tag to this one because it didn't have it. And now if I search just PHL, I'm going to see everything that has that PHL tag. So a really good way to use tags is either location, or if you want to make it super simple for your coworkers to find what has been uploaded by you, you can tag it with your company name or even a tagging system that you all agree on. So it makes it easier to search because the search bar here searches all of the text and all of the layers. So it's really helpful to have those tagged correctly. All right. So today we kind of started at the beginning. We talked about what even is a layer, what are the different types of formats that Giraffe accepts, my little grain of salt opinion on what's good, better, best about those layer types. And then we did, a little Google sleuthing. We found a layer that looked interesting to us using keywords, pulled in that API and uploaded it to Giraffe. And then after that, we just reviewed the upload process for all of the different main layer types. So your vector, your Esri, your WMS, and your raster images. And then lastly, we took a little bit of a look at the data management around your layers. So one, giving them really nice names. Two, making sure you style them on upload if you want them to look a certain way. And then three, going in and adding things like layer group, tag, and sharing. So with that, that concludes our webinar for today. If you would like to hang out a few more minutes and ask any questions live, please feel free to do so. But I will stop recording now. And if you don't have any questions, hopefully we'll see you at the next one. Thanks so much for joining.